All right, in part 2 of this custom control section, we're going to look at the actual mouse controls and see how it is that they're working. So we need to re-enable our script for the mouse look Y, and let's remember what this might be up to. So in my game, mouse is looking left and right, does nothing, but up and down, I'm looking up and down. And if I go back and look at my scene, notice my head is tilted. This is actually affecting the way that my player head moves, which is why I attached this script to my player head and not to my player. If this script, mouse look Y, was attached to my first person player, master kind of head of the hierarchy level, then the whole body would be rotating all together, which is not what we want. So I attached this functionality just to the head, which also controls the camera and the gun and all of its subcomponents. Let's see what this script does. A little bit shorter. I have a value for mouse sensitivity, something that we'll be able to tweak to fit kind of the player's style. Maybe later on we'll have a UI where the player can choose their own sensitivity. And then I'm also actually limiting the rotation. My up Y rotate, I'm going to allow the player to kind of tilt their head all the way back and look at the sky. But downwards, you know, the body gets in the way. The chin bumps into your chest if you look down. You can maybe hear my voice as I actually do this in real life. So I'm only going to limit it to 45 degrees down. If I made this more, what if I made this like a big number? 180. Oh, my finger slipped. 180. And, oh, it might not update here. It didn't. I'll put it in here. And then I ran my script again. What I can notice that's a really weird behavior now is I can actually look behind myself like an owl. I guess, wait, owls can't look in this way. Okay, ignore what I just said. That was really dumb. Anyway, so up, I'm limited, but now that's way too far. So I can turn this back. I think it was 45 before. What if I made it only 10? That would mean that my downwards, I'm really limited. So I've set somehow a limitation on how far the rotation is able to go, which can be really useful for this type of scenario. I'll talk about how that is implemented in a sec. Next, I need a transform of my player's head. So I'm actually going to attach the transform of myself to this. I could just access it through script, but I just wanted to show you that I can either just get the transform directly from the object I'm attached to, or I can just manually drag and connect it here. Maybe you'll prefer writing your code in this kind of a connection way. Finally, the Y rotation that I can set. I guess this is a private here. We'll see what this does in a sec. So at the start, I'm running this custom piece of functionality. Cursor lock mode locked to set my cursor lock state. This is what allows my cursor to disappear when I'm in play mode so that I'm not looking at other windows and I'm just moving my scene. No, you see on my second monitor that it kind of goes off the screen on the side here, but when I'm in the screen, we don't see the mouse. It's locked to the screen. And when you play it on your single monitors, it should just lock perfectly each time. Finally, how am I actually applying the rotations? I'm getting a mouse float value from my axis mouse get Y. What a surprise. I can access my input manager and I have my mouse X and mouse Y input manager axes, and it gets me the information from the mouse automatically. It's so simple. I'm going to multiply it by the mouse sensitivity and time delta time just to customize the value as much as possible. And then I'm going to take my Y rotation, which I just kind of set to 0 at the start, and it's a float value. I'm going to minus mouse Y from it. This is going to help determine the directionality and hold it in a variable so that I am able to apply this in something called a clamp. And a clamp is responsible for limiting the values. Basically, I put in the first value of a clamp, it's this, the docs pop up here. The first value is the value that I have, that I'm inputting. And then the second value is the minimum value allowed, and the third value is the maximum value allowed. So the up and down rotations, if my Y rotation is less than this, it will be set to this. And if it's more than this, it will be set than this. And if it's in between, it's fine, it's no problem. It just enforces a certain range of values so that I don't have this weird head behaving like an owl, which can look through its body apparently. And then finally, I transform my local rotation. This is something that actually, rotations are weird and they're complicated, and we're going to save talking about them more in depth to a point where you might actually really need it in your game. Some of you might not even worry too much about it much at all. But it involves something called a quaternion. And rotations have extra information that really mess things up very quickly. So we have to use a special functionality called a Euler, or an Euler, his name is actually pronounced, I believe, value, which is kind of like it's basically like a vector 3 for rotations, where I can set the new rotation value, and here I set it to be the X rotation slot. That's the one I determined that I wanted it to the axis I wanted it to rotate along. So this line right here is going to be baffling to you in many ways for now, and that's okay, but it's a way that I can rotate. What you need to know is that you could change this rotation to a different dimension, and it will rotate things very differently, and you can explore and experiment with those different types of rotations. And this is what gets that head rotating in the way that we saw. Okay, let's look at the other axis. I'm going to enable this again. And, oh, I think I didn't change my settings from allowing the look through the body. I'll have to fix that later. That's all right for now. So I'm back to being able to actually turn my whole body left and right. So here's something to think about. My player head has the Y up and down connected to it because I want the gun and the head to all rotate together. But the main camera itself has this mouse look X on it. And how come I put it here? Well, I'm trying to be a little bit forward thinking. This is going to be maybe the most advanced thing I talk about yet. So if you're kind of feeling like, okay, this is enough, Mr. L, you may actually want to tune out the rest of this video. But if you're like, I really want to think far ahead, follow along. This script is doing much the same as our previous one. Mouse sensitivity, it's getting a transform of our player body because I want to know where the player is. So the actual first person player, I want to know my position relative to it. Actually, what I want to do here, to be honest, is to be able to influence it. I'm going to make a little note of this here. I want to be able to change player info. So I want a connection to it. That's what I'm doing here. I want to be able to change the transform of my player. And then I do the same strategies before where I kind of set up a bit of a value for X rotation, although actually maybe I don't even use this in this one here. So let's cut this out to make it a bit simpler. I make sure the cursor is locked. Now I did it in the other one. This is maybe a bit redundant. Let's delete it for now because it's keep it even a little bit simpler. And in my update, I'm gathering my mouse X axis. Beautiful. And then I'm rotating based off of my up times my mouse X. So that I get this rotation going. Technically, I should probably do time delta time here as well. Let's just patch this up and see how this looks and feels for the rotation. Did I break anything here? Oh, with the time delta time and my sensitivity, it's really, really slow. Let's remove this for now. And one time delta time is probably enough for this calculation here. So the question is, what am I actually doing with this rotation? I'm not rotating my camera. I'm rotating the player body that I connected to it, which is a curious thing to do. So why didn't I just have this mouse look X attached to my first person player in the first place? The simple answer is I could have. That would have worked just fine. For all intents and purposes, it's kind of working the same way, where this is actually just accessing this and telling it to rotate so that everything rotates together. But why do I have it split up? Well, one thing that I know from real life is that when I turn my head, I can make it look left and right a little bit without actually turning my body. I might want to give some functionality like that in my game, or if I move my mouse a little bit, the head turns slightly, but then a lot, my whole body turns. Meaning, I might want there to be a mixture of local turning of only my camera. In that case, maybe I should attach it to my head in the first place, or maybe it's kind of a little peak. Maybe I want to actually have a peak value where I don't actually turn too much. I'm just kind of shifting my eyes left and right. I could actually add in here the ability to press a key and then have my camera pivot, but I can still have my body pivot if certain types of movement happen. So I'm kind of pre-building a structure that allows me to customize the turning of the camera in different ways later, but still affecting the whole system in a way that I want. And it also shows us that we can access this layer of the system from a deeper layer simply by connecting it in place and then telling it some information directly. So there you go. There's a look at some 3 different layers of motion that allows us to do some really cool stuff, to be able to have this. Even though the art is very simple, I think it looks pretty awesome that I'm able to. Whoa, my game just went crazy over here. Game, I want you here. To be able to look up and down and move and jump, and I have this pretty cool customized looking scene being developed here. Explore this in detail, try your best to understand, and the next tutorials are going to come a little bit faster as we build more of the functionality of this experience.